All right, we're going to be using the Payload Forge application to test a very basic API. So this first endpoint is a post mapping for creating a user. Does require you to put in a prefix of whether it is HTTP or HTTPS. Since it's a local check, it's HTTP. We're going to call this a health check endpoint, right? We don't have any, we have an expected case, which is just going to be status okay. It's not going to be a 400, and there's not going to be a message that we want to check. So now if we run this, we got a failed. Reason being is that it's not a post, so that gets us to see this drop down where you can select if it's a put, patch, delete, or get. Once we do that, we could do run test, review results. You could see that it was okay. Now we want to add an endpoint, and when we do that, we're going to start testing our user endpoint, and we're going to call this user check. That does have more than two fields actually. Our user object has an extra field age, which is going to be a number. And once you do that, you can see it detects the fields and it lets you kind of generate values for them. You can either make it a unique email, a random name, a random number, a date that's now, a UUID, one of, or even make it null. At the moment, we can just keep these values and we're going to go for a missing username where we're not going to try and verify the expected result. Instead, we're just going to look for that 400 status. To do a missing username though, as you can see, it's already fixed at test. We're going to have to add an override to the username field. The override value is going to be that it's null. And then we're going to click run test. Okay, so we can see that this is the message it gives back. So you can even make it verify that message. All right, now let's see what happens if I were to come here and add something silly like a C to the end of the message. It'll say it failed, but it still gave you the right status. So we can get rid of that. Now we want to add a test case. Um, this test case is going to be missing password. This is also going to give a 400. This is basically going to go for the password field. This is going to stay fixed. This is going to be what gets updated. I'm going to just kind of give that a default value. We're going to add our override, and it's going to be for the password field. We're going to make it null. Okay, and now we're going to run our tests. You can see it has 2 that passed. All right, and we can see it says please provide passwords. So now we can go and add that expected message right here. If you run both tests again, they both pass. There are some more test cases we can do. Let's say somebody wanted to make a empty username. Well, this is also going to be one of those 400 kind of cases. We want to add an override. That's going to give me the username again. And this time we're just going to put a space in there. We don't want to put an actual value, just a blank space. And now we're going to run it. And we'll see that we got 3 passing tests. Empty username. Even though the username was empty, it's actually asking for a password here. So that's because we're sending in a password and a username up here. So we'll just do that. Edit those values there. Click run test. Now it's saying one failed. So that's because it is taking in the username and password there for this particular case, but it is showing us another thing, which is to please provide age above or equal to 18. So the override value has to be an actual value. We can try removing that override and just putting a fixed value of blank for that test. Now we get past 3. Okay. Still giving the wrong message though. So this actually helps us figure out if the API is doing something correct or wrong. Now we can say, well, let's go check what we got on our API side. And with a very small change, we can basically log what username was given here. And this works with any kind of API. You don't have to use Java necessarily. So I use Java because it's what I like. And we don't have to even use a special fancy logger. We can break the rules a little bit here and do system dot out user dot get username. And this is going to help us verify that the API is getting the. So now that we've rerun the API and we've passed the test in again, we can see that for one test, the username comes in null. For the other one, it comes in blank. And for the other one, it comes in blank. And if we look at the code here, it doesn't do check for blank. It actually just checks for an empty string altogether. So now we can go back to Payload Forge and we can kind of leave it like this and run the test. And now you can see it's giving the correct 400 status, and where you have missing password, all of a sudden it's got another problem. So we can go back and select that missing password test, and you see how this is saying fixed for username. We actually have to put a value there for this to work correctly for all the tests. We have to use the override field to put it. So we're just going to put test back in here, and we're going to run the test again. I like to run them just to make sure it's doing what we want. Now we know that it's back to the same state as before with the age needing to be above. We're going to select our empty username. We're going to do override on the username field. We're going to leave that override completely blank. And you can see that it's asking us to please provide a username. So right there, we figured out a issue with the API where it may allow a username to be created with a blank space. So that's kind of what the purpose of this is to have these repeatable test cases that can be run on your API. There are some more cases we're going to work on right now. You don't just have to do string fields. You can do numbers as well. So let's add another case, and this time we're going to do the age being wrong. We'll just type in wrong age. And we're going to try leaving the status as is. We're going to remove the override for right now. We have one failed test. Why is it failed? Because it expected 200 and it got 400. And it says, please provide an age above or equal to 18. So we're going to change this to a 400. And you can give it a better name that's more fitting, where it basically, instead of wrong age, you could say age lower than 18. Let's add another case. Okay, and this case is going to be called correct age. And this time we expect a 200 result. We're going to select the age field. We're going to put in the age 18. We're going to run our test. We've got one failure, which is probably our new one that we just did. Now it expects 200, but it says equal to or above. Uh-oh, this could mean that there's an issue with the actual API. So we come back to the API, and we see here there's a line that says, user.getAge less than or equal to 18. So that should be evaluating correctly. So we can once again add a bit of logging right here. We can Let's stop the API, reload it. And once it's reloaded, we can run our tests again, come back to the API. Now we can see that 18 is actually the age getting passed in. So why is it coming inside here then? Let's go back to Payload Forge. We've got correct age. We are providing an age here. Let's just make, see, this is set to fixed. Let's see, let's try and make this 19. Okay, so by making it 19, we actually got it to work. And that basically shows that the API doesn't actually accept a age of 18. Now, can we make it accept that? Yep, we probably can. But that's not what we're doing right now. So now you have all these test cases, and this one, you get a user created response, which is something that you'd want. So you can build out for any endpoint all the test cases that you need with the expected status and expected response body type. So that is a pretty interesting thing that you can do with this. Now, obviously, there are other features here. One of the other features is the ability to add headers and override them. So we'll have to switch to a different part of the API to kind of show off that. Let's just look at this echo endpoint for right now, where it's basically able to spit back up the headers that you have. Once we come here, we can do API / test / echo. This is a get endpoint, and now we don't need this payload anymore. Click validate JSON. We can delete all these cases that were over here. And what you should do when you're doing this is that you should make sure you don't have the same endpoint that you were just working on. You should actually add a new one. But now it's a bit too late. So every time you work on an endpoint, you should try and save it. And you can actually save the whole project too. So now if we were going to do this, we want to kind of run it and just to see what it does. There are no test cases, so it just basically ping the API doing nothing. Let's add a test case that basically says we want a 200 status. Okay, we get a basic 200 status and we get this wonderful JSON object down here. Now it can verify this as well. I know that this one has timestamps attached to it. It won't actually be able to verify the timestamp in there. So that is something that is potentially an area of improvement for this. But anyway, let's look at adding a, not a header override, but let's just add a header in general. So you can come here and click on headers, add a header, and let's call this one, pretty standard header, content type. Okay, click done. Then we can run the test again. We still get a pass. And this time it did something a little different. Okay. Let's go ahead and test out adding that header override. So we'll say content type, and we'll just put a little bit of something random in there. Okay, so each time it put it in there, you can see over here, we don't really have any logging around this to see what's going on here. So we can this gives us a map. We can kind of get those printed out here to make sure that we're getting what we want in there. So in this case, I believe it is a map like this. And headers dot, and this is probably not the best way to do this, but this is mostly for demonstrating how the tool works, not how to uh, make Java code. So what we want to do here is print out those headers that come back, and those are going to be the keys right there. So we want to do headers dot get keys. We're just going to restart this API, and we're going to run the test again to make sure that we're getting the headers that we expect. And this is mostly demonstrating just what this tool can do. So if I click run and review the results, those are all the same. We come back to the API, you can see that it got a, well, that's a strange one that I got. We can try and remove this. Let's try running it again. Seems to get the local host. That could just be an issue with the API itself. Over here where it says headers.next element, that might not actually be getting the header names. But it is able to grab that information and print it out. But this seems more like a Java issue rather than the tool sending the incorrect thing. So once you've added your header, you can run the test case, and you can see right here you've got application JSON added, and also it tells you the content length and all the other default kind of adds. So before the API just wasn't adding those. Now we can go and let's say add another one. This is just going to be our own custom one because a lot of APIs have custom test cases. So now when we run it, we've got test in there. Okay, now another common thing that you need when you have APIs is the use of authorization. So in authorization, you normally have to add a bearer token of some kind. So we can actually make a separate endpoint and add our authorization. So let's go back to the program, and we're going to type in bearer, and this time we're going to run it first and see that we get a 500. So this is it failing because there is no bearer token. Not good, right? So we're going to do this, and we're just going to call it failure no auth. Now you might want to give a different status in a real API other than 500, but that's what we're using for this person's. OK auth is going to be the name of this one. We're going to add a header override. This is going to be authorization. And then the value has to be the made up little authorization token that this application has. All right, so we've got that. We're going to run it. And now we get a failed still. The reason is that authorization actually has to be added from the authorization tab, not the add override. So we're going to cancel that. We're going to go over to authorization. We're going to type in bearer token. Okay, and then we're going to give the actual bearer token value from the API. Then we're going to run our tests. We still have a fail coming in on that one. Oh, and that's because we're trying to do a post when it is a get. All right. So changing that actually caused an interesting occurrence where the no off path is now passing because the authorization is set for both the tests. There might be a way to override that if we come here. Let's see if we can actually override the authorization or if that's not a supported feature. We'll just put something small word in there. We can see that they both failed this time. One time it is saying that, the data is incorrect. And then this time it's saying, hey, that's an invalid token. So for the first test, it actually is still passing because we're not overriding that bearer token. Whereas down here, we're actually expecting not a 500, but a 401. So we kind of flipped the test cases there, but now we've got it working right. So we can just change the name of them, no problem. Pass auth, and then we can say access denied. Run the test again. There you go. Now, like I mentioned, you can save the project. And I'm going to open up the project again. Just 1 second. So you can see that this one is a clean open. Everything is this is how the application opens up in default. We're going to get rid of some things and then we're going to click on load. And we just made that file. So we're going to open it. And then we're going to make sure that it can run the tests right out the bat. And there you go. You can load all your tests. So this is how you can use Payload Forge to kind of test APIs. You can check the statuses. You can check the expected responses. And it can help you have a giant collection of tests for your APIs that doesn't require any coding. Um, there are some more features that revolve around the JSON payloads that I can go over in future tutorials around this.